The emergency beacon shrieked across the void between stars, its distress signal carrying the desperate plea of the Kithara colony ship. Gentle Dawn. Captain Veltar's 4 arms trembled as he activated the transmission array, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the crimson warning lights that bathed the bridge in hellish red. "Send it on the emergency frequency," Veltar commanded, his voice carrying the melodic tones typical of his species. "Alert our allies in the Confederation. Tell them the Bloodfang Corsairs have found us." The communications officer, young Selanin, worked frantically at her station. "Captain, the quantum relay is damaged. The signal, it's not routing through our usual channels." Outside the viewports, the sleek black vessels of the Corsairs closed in like predators surrounding wounded prey. The Bloodfang Corsairs were notorious throughout this sector of the galaxy. Pirates, slavers, and worse. They had been hunting the peaceful Kithara refugee fleet for 3 cycles now, ever since the colony ships had fled their dying homeworld. "I don't care where it goes," Veltar said, watching the enemy ships position themselves for attack. "Just send it. Someone, anyone might hear us." The Gentle Dawn shuddered as the first energy blasts struck her shields. Around them, the other colony ships in their small convoy began to scatter, but there was nowhere to run. They were traveling ships, not warships. Their shields were designed to protect against cosmic radiation and small debris, not military-grade plasma cannons. Selanin's fingers danced across her console as she transmitted the distress call. "Signal sent, Captain. But I'm not sure where it went. The relay is routing it through sectors I don't recognize." Another series of impacts rocked the ship. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, emergency klaxons wailed. Veltar gripped the arms of his command chair, watching helplessly as a Corsair dreadnought moved into position directly ahead of them. The communication channel crackled to life, filled with the harsh, guttural voice of a Bloodfang captain. "Kithara vessel, this is War Leader Grixnall of the Bone Render. Surrender your ships and prepare to be boarded. Your people will make excellent slaves, and your technology will fetch a fine price on the black market." Veltar closed his eyes. His people had suffered so much already. Their homeworld had become uninhabitable due to industrial pollution, forcing them to become wanderers among the stars. They were peaceful by nature, scientists and artists and philosophers. They had no weapons, no military tradition. They were utterly defenseless against the Corsairs. "Captain," his first officer Mordun whispered, "perhaps we should comply. At least some of us might survive." But Veltar shook his head. He had heard stories about Bloodfang slave camps. Death would be kinder than what awaited his people there. "No," he said firmly. "We knew this day might come. If we must die, we die free." The Corsair dreadnought's main guns began to glow with deadly energy. In moments they would fire, and the Gentle Dawn would be reduced to cosmic dust. Veltar thought of the families aboard his ship, the children who would never see another sunrise, the elders who carried the last memories of their homeworld. Then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open in a brilliant flash of blue-white light. The subspace rift expanded rapidly, larger than anything Veltar had ever seen. And from that impossible wound in reality, something emerged. It was a ship, but unlike any vessel in the Kithara databases, or even the crude designs favored by the Corsairs. This ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest Bloodfang dreadnought. Its hull was a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange angular sections jutted from its surface at impossible angles, giving it the appearance of some predatory beast made of steel and shadow. But it was not alone. More rifts opened across the battlefield. 1, 2, a dozen. Then 20 ships emerged from the tiers in space. They varied in size and configuration, but all shared that same predatory design philosophy. They moved with a purposeful grace, that spoke of advanced technology and experienced crews. The largest of the newcomers dwarfed even the Corsair capital ships. It looked like it could crack planets open with its bare hull. Weapons emplacements dotted its surface like scales on some ancient dragon, each one larger than the main guns on most warships. The Bloodfang fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming moments before, suddenly looked very small and very outmatched. "What in the void are those?" Morden whispered, his voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, the communication channels exploded with activity. The transmission was on an open frequency, broadcast to every ship in the area. The voice that spoke was alien, but the universal translator worked overtime to convert the words into something the Kythera could understand. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy, commanding the 5th Expeditionary Fleet," the voice said, cold and professional. "We received a distress signal from this location. State the nature of your emergency." Veltar stared at the view screen in shock. Terran Federation? He had never heard of such an organization. But whoever these newcomers were, their timing was miraculous. The Bloodfang war leader recovered first. Grixinal's voice crackled over the comm with typical Corsair arrogance. "Unknown vessels, you are interfering in lawful salvage operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." There was a long pause. Then Admiral Chen spoke again, and this time there was something different in her voice. Something that made Veltar's crystalline skin crawl with instinctive dread. "Lawful salvage operations?" she repeated, the words dripping with barely contained rage. "I'm reading approximately 40,000 life signs on those refugee vessels. They're not salvage, they're people." "They are cargo," Grixinal snarled back. "Slaves to be sold in the markets of the Rim. Their surrender has already been demanded." Another pause. Veltar watched as the unknown Terran ships began to spread out, their formations shifting with military precision. He could see weapon systems coming online across their hulls, and the energy readings on his sensors were climbing to frightening levels. When Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. "War Leader Grixnal, this is your only warning. Release those civilian vessels and withdraw from this system immediately. You have 60 seconds to comply." Grixnal's response was predictable. "You dare threaten the Bloodfang Corsairs? We have been reaping this sector for generations. You face 27 ships of the line, alien fools. Retreat now or be destroyed." 50 seconds, Chen replied calmly. The Corsairs began to reposition, clearly intending to fight. Veltar could see their tactical doctrine in action. Swarm tactics, using their numbers to overwhelm enemies. It had worked against every foe they had faced before. 40 seconds. The Bloodfang weapons systems powered up, their energy signatures blazing across the electromagnetic spectrum. The Corsair fleet outnumbered the mysterious Terrans roughly 2-1. In any conventional engagement, the pirates would have the advantage. 30 seconds. Veltar found himself holding his breath. Around the bridge, his crew stood frozen, watching the drama unfold. They were caught between two military forces, each possessing firepower that could vaporize their refugee fleet in minutes. 20 seconds. The largest Corsair dreadnought, the Bone Render, began moving forward, its massive bulk accelerating toward the Terran formation. Behind it, the rest of the pirate fleet followed in a classic hammer and anvil formation. 10 seconds. Grixinal's voice echoed across the comm one final time. "You should have run, aliens! Now you die with the Kythera slaves!" "Time's up," Admiral Chen said, and her voice carried the weight of final judgment. What happened next would haunt Veltar's dreams for cycles to come. The Terran ships didn't fire conventional energy weapons or launch missiles. Instead, they did something that defied every law of warfare that the Kythera understood. Lines of pure force reached out from their hulls, not beams or projectiles, but tears in space itself. These tears carved through the Corsair ships like a blade through paper. The Bone Render, That mighty dreadnought that had terrorized shipping lanes for decades simply came apart. Not explosively, not dramatically, it just separated into component pieces as if someone had disconnected every bolt and weld that held it together. The crew had perhaps a second to realize what was happening before their atmosphere vented into space. 3 more Corsair vessels died in the first salvo, just ceased to exist as functioning spacecraft. The remaining pirates tried to return fire, but their weapons seemed pitiful against the Terran ship's defenses. Energy beams that could penetrate capital ship armor simply splashed harmlessly against the dark hulls of the human vessels. And then the Terran ships began to move. They didn't accelerate gradually like normal spacecraft. They simply moved. One moment they were in formation behind their flagship, the next they were scattered throughout the battlefield, each one hunting its prey with terrifying efficiency. Veltar's sensors couldn't track them properly. They moved too fast, changed direction too quickly. The Corsair fleet, which had seemed so mighty and terrible just moments before, was being systematically dismantled. Ship after ship fell to those impossible weapons, their hulls carved apart with surgical precision. Some tried to flee, but the Terran vessels were faster, much faster. "By the ancient crystals," Mordoon breathed. "What are they?" Veltar had no answer. He watched in stunned silence as 27 Bloodfang warships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris and escaping atmosphere. The engagement lasted perhaps 3 minutes. When it was over, the space around the Cathara convoy was filled with the wreckage of what had once been the most feared pirate fleet in the sector. Not a single Terran vessel showed any signs of damage. Admiral Chen's voice returned to the communication channel, but now she was addressing the Cathara directly. "Refugee vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Please respond. We received your distress signal and are here to assist." Veltar struggled to find his voice. When he finally spoke, his words came out as barely more than a whisper. "This is Captain Veltar of the Cathara colony ship." "Gentle Dawn. Admiral Chen, who are you? Where did you come from?" There was warmth in the human admiral's voice when she replied. "We're explorers, Captain. We heard your call for help. Are your people safe? Do you require medical assistance or emergency supplies?" Veltar looked around his bridge at the shocked faces of his crew. "We are unharmed. But those Corsairs, they had been hunting us for months. They're not going to hurt anyone anymore," Chen said firmly. "Captain, would it be possible for us to send over a diplomatic team? We'd like to learn more about your people and offer whatever assistance we can." Veltar's mind reeled. These beings, these Terrans, had just annihilated an entire pirate fleet with casual efficiency. They had weapons and technology that seemed almost godlike, and now they were offering help. "You would help us?" he asked, hardly daring to believe it. "That's what we do," Admiral Chen replied simply. "We explore the galaxy, we meet new civilizations, and we help where we can. Your distress call found its way to us through a quantum relay malfunction. We consider that a fortunate accident." As if summoned by her words, one of the Terran ships began approaching the Gentle Dawn. It was smaller than their flagship, but still larger than any Cathara vessel. As it drew closer, Veltar could see that its hull was scarred and weathered, speaking of countless voyages through the dark between stars. "Prepare to receive our diplomatic shuttle," Admiral Chen continued. "And Captain, welcome to the galactic community. We have much to discuss." The diplomatic shuttle that emerged from the Terran vessel was unlike anything in Veltar's experience. Where Cathara craft emphasized graceful curves and artistic beauty, this machine was pure function. Its angular hull suggested efficiency and practicality, but there was an underlying elegance in its purposeful design. It docked with the Gentle Dawn, with mechanical precision, sealing systems engaging with barely a whisper. Captain Veltar stood in the primary docking bay alongside his senior staff, their crystalline forms reflecting the soft luminescence of the bay's lighting. His first officer, Morden, fidgeted nervously with the ceremonial welcome crystals that were traditional when greeting new species. None of them quite knew what to expect from beings capable of such devastating military efficiency. The shuttle's airlock cycled, and 3 figures emerged. The humans were bipedal, as the scanner readings had indicated, but seeing them in person was still startling. They were shorter than most Kithara, but there was something about the way they moved that spoke of coiled strength. Their bodies were covered in what appeared to be organic flesh, rather than crystalline carapaces, and their faces were remarkably expressive, despite lacking the natural luminescence that Kithara used for emotional communication. The leader stepped forward and offered what Veltar's cultural database identified as a smile, a facial expression indicating friendliness among humans. "Captain Veltar, I'm Commander Maria Santos, diplomatic liaison for the 5th Expeditionary Fleet. This is Dr. James Wright, our xenobiologist, and Lieutenant Commander Alex Park, my security advisor." Veltar performed the traditional Kithara greeting, a graceful lowering of his arms accompanied by a soft, harmonic tone from his throat sac. "Commander Santos, you honor us with your presence. I must confess, we have never heard of your Terran Federation. Are you from beyond the galactic rim?" Commander Santos's expression shifted slightly, and Veltar noticed her exchanging a quick glance with her companions. "Not exactly, Captain. We're from what you would call the Sol system, in the Orion Arm. We've been exploring this region for about 15 years now, though we tend to keep a low profile." "Sol system?" Morden spoke up, his harmonic voice rising with confusion. "But our star charts show no inhabited systems in that region. The Galactic Confederation's surveys indicated only primitive life forms in the Orion Arm." Dr. Wright, a thin human with what appeared to be corrective optical devices covering his eyes, cleared his throat. "The Galactic Confederation's surveys were conducted approximately 200 of your years ago, correct? A great deal can change in 2 centuries. The implications of that statement sent a chill through Veltar's crystalline form. A species could not develop from primitive life forms to advanced spacefaring civilization in mere centuries. That was impossible according to every model of evolutionary development known to galactic science. "Perhaps," Commander Santos said diplomatically, "we should discuss this somewhere more comfortable. Captain, would it be possible to tour your ship? We'd very much like to learn about Kithara culture and technology." As they moved through the corridors of the gentle dawn, Veltar found himself studying his guests with growing fascination and unease. The humans moved with an economy of motion that suggested both physical fitness and combat training. Their eyes, those strange organic sensors, seemed to take in every detail of their surroundings, cataloging information with machine-like efficiency. "Your vessel is beautiful," Dr. Wright commented as they passed through one of the ship's crystal gardens, where bioluminescent plants from the Kithara homeworld provided both sustenance and spiritual comfort to the refugees. The integration of biological and technological systems is remarkably sophisticated. "Art and function are one in Kithara philosophy," Veltar explained, pleased despite his nervousness. "We believe that beauty feeds the soul as surely as food feeds the body. But your ships? They are very different." Lieutenant Commander Park nodded. "Human ship design tends to prioritize efficiency and survivability. We come from what you might call a hostile environment." "Your homeworld experiences difficult conditions?" Morden asked. "All of our worlds do," Commander Santos replied. "Humans evolved on what we call a death world, Captain. High gravity, violent weather, geological instability, aggressive predators, and extreme environmental variations. It shaped how we think, how we build, and how we fight." They had arrived at the conference room, where Veltar had arranged for a selection of traditional Cathara foods and cultural artifacts to be displayed. The humans examined everything with obvious interest, though he noticed they politely declined to taste anything. A wise precaution given the biological differences between their species. "Deathworld?" Veltar asked, settling into his favorite contemplation alcove. "That term is unfamiliar to us." Dr. Wright activated a small device that projected a holographic display. In galactic classification systems, worlds are rated based on their habitability. Class 1 worlds are garden paradises with stable climates and minimal dangers. Class 10 worlds are barely habitable death traps. Most spacefaring species evolved on Class 2 or 3 worlds. The hologram shifted to show a blue and green world swathed in white clouds. Earth, our homeworld, would rate as a Class 9. Massive storms that can destroy entire regions, tectonic activity that can level mountain ranges overnight, temperature variations that can span 100 degrees, and an ecosystem where nearly everything is trying to kill and eat everything else. Veltar stared at the projection in horror. "Your people evolved in such conditions?" "More than evolved," Commander Santos said grimly. "We thrived. Humans are persistence hunters, pack predators from a world where only the most adaptable survived. We don't just endure hostile conditions, we turn them into advantages." The conversation was interrupted by a communication alert. Veltar activated his personal communicator to find Salanin's excited face projected in the air before them. "Captain," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this. We're receiving communications from across the sector. Word of what happened here is spreading, and the responses are unprecedented." "Patch them through to the conference room," Veltar ordered. The air filled with overlapping transmissions in dozens of languages, all being processed by the ship's universal translator. Veltar could pick out fragments, trade consortium officials demanding to know what had happened to the Bloodfang fleet, military commanders reporting massive energy signatures detected in this system, and underneath it all, a growing undercurrent of fear. One transmission stood out above the rest, an emergency broadcast from the hegemony of SCAR, one of the most powerful military organizations in the sector. "All vessels be advised. Unknown military force has engaged and eliminated Bloodfang Corsair fleet in Cathara convoy area. Energy signatures indicate weapon systems of unprecedented power. Classification: extreme threat. All military units are ordered to avoid contact pending further intelligence." The humans listened to this with expressions that Veltar was learning to read as amusement. "Extreme threat?" Lieutenant Commander Park chuckled. "That's new. Usually we get classified as impossible or sensors malfunctioning." "This happens often?" Mordoon asked weakly. "More often than we'd like," Commander Santos admitted. "Captain, I think it's time we explain something about human presence in this galaxy. Dr. Wright?" The xenobiologist adjusted his optical devices. 15 years ago, humanity made first contact with galactic civilization. It didn't go well. The species we encountered assumed we were either primitive or lying about our capabilities. When we tried to demonstrate our technology, they classified us as a threat and attempted to neutralize us. "The Kethmaran incident," Lieutenant Commander Park added darkly. 27 member species of the Galactic Confederation sent their finest warships to pacify the dangerous primitives from the Orion Arm. They brought 800 ships. Veltar felt his crystal matrix resonating with dread. "What happened?" "We tried diplomacy first," Commander Santos said quietly. "We really did, but they wouldn't listen. They were convinced that beings from a Class 9 world couldn't possibly pose a threat to their advanced civilization. They opened fire on our diplomatic vessels." "The engagement lasted 18 minutes, Dr. Wright continued. "Not one human ship was lost. The combined fleet of 27 species was completely destroyed. After that, the galactic community decided that perhaps leaving humanity alone was the wisest course of action. The implications crashed over Veltar like a tidal wave. These beings, these humans, were so powerful that the entire Galactic Confederation, with its thousands of member species and millions of warships, actively avoided them. "But you saved us," he whispered. "Why would beings of such power concern themselves with refugees?" Commander Santos's expression grew sad. "Because we know what it's like to be homeless, Captain. Humanity's early expansion into space wasn't driven by curiosity or the desire for conquest. It was driven by necessity. Our homeworld was dying, poisoned by our own industrial excess, torn apart by resource wars and climate catastrophes. We became refugees among the stars long before we developed faster-than-light travel." "We lived on generation ships for centuries," Dr. Wright added. "Huge vessels carrying the last remnants of human civilization, searching for worlds we could terraform or adapt to. We know the desperation of watching your children grow up in the cold void between stars, never knowing if they'll ever breathe real air or feel real sunlight. When we hear a refugee distress call," Lieutenant Commander Park said firmly, "we respond, always. It doesn't matter if it's accidental, if it's across the galaxy, or if it puts us in contact with species that might try to destroy us. We remember what it was like to be helpless and alone in the dark." Veltar found himself struggling with emotions too complex for his harmonic voice to express. These beings, these terrifying warriors from a nightmare world, had risked exposure and potential conflict to save people they'd never met. "There's something else you should know," Commander Santos said gently. "Your distress call didn't just reach us by accident. Our quantum communication arrays have been passively monitoring distress frequencies across this entire galactic arm for years. We've helped dozens of species, usually without them ever knowing we were involved. The Milani trade convoy that mysteriously survived the Vorthon pirate attack last year," Dr. Wright explained. "The Zenthari colony that discovered massive mineral deposits just when their economy was collapsing. The plague cure that appeared in the Sothek medical databases with no identifiable source." "You've been protecting this entire region?" Mordun asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Protecting, helping, guiding when we can," Commander Santos confirmed. "We learned early that direct contact usually leads to conflict. Most species can't handle the truth about humanity's capabilities. So we work in the shadows, trying to make this corner of the galaxy a little safer and a little kinder." A new communication alert interrupted them. This time, it was from the human fleet. "Commander Santos, this is Admiral Chen. We're receiving long-range communications from multiple sources. It appears that news of today's engagement has reached the Galactic Confederation. They're dispatching investigation fleets to this sector." Commander Santos activated her own communicator. "How long until they arrive?" "Approximately 72 hours for the advanced scouts. Maybe a week for the main investigation force. They're pulling ships from all across this arm of the galaxy." Veltar felt his crystal matrix dimming with alarm. "Commander, if the Confederation discovers your people's involvement, will there be another conflict?" The human diplomat was quiet for a long moment. "Possibly. We've managed to avoid direct contact for 15 years, but eventually, well, secrets this big have a way of getting out. Today might be the day that changes everything." She looked directly at Veltar, her strange organic eyes reflecting a sadness that transcended species barriers. "Captain, we're going to offer your people something no other species in this galaxy has. A choice. You can file your report with the Confederation authorities, tell them exactly what happened here. They'll investigate, they'll eventually find evidence of our involvement, and the galaxy will learn that humanity is active in this region." "Or," Mordun prompted, "or we evacuate your entire convoy to human space," Lieutenant Commander Park said. "Give you new worlds to settle, new lives free from the Confederation's politics and the threat of pirates. But if you choose that option, You'll be stepping outside galactic civilization entirely. There would be no going back. The weight of the decision pressed down on Veltar like the gravity of a neutron star. The survival of his people, the future of human galactic relations, and the balance of power across entire star systems hung on what happened next. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the communicator. "Commander, we have movement on long-range sensors. The first investigation ships just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They'll be here in 6 hours." Commander Santos stood. "I'm afraid, Captain, that time has just run out." Captain Veltar stood before the assembled representatives of the refugee convoy, their crystalline forms creating a symphony of reflected light in the main assembly hall of the Gentle Dawn. 43 ships, nearly 200,000 souls, all looking to him for guidance in what might be the most important decision in Kithara history. The debate had raged for 4 hours while the human fleet maintained a protective perimeter around them. Outside, the investigation vessels of the Galactic Confederation drew closer with each passing minute. Elder Korthalan, her ancient crystal matrix dimmed with age and wisdom, spoke first. "Captain, the Terrans offer us sanctuary, but at what cost? To accept their protection would make us outcasts from galactic civilization. Our children would grow up as strangers to our own culture. Our culture nearly died with our homeworld," argued Captain Zelmon of the Crystal Song. "What good is maintaining our connection to galactic civilization if we're dead? These humans risked themselves to save us. They ask for nothing in return except the chance to help us rebuild." Commander Santos and her team had withdrawn to give the Kithara privacy for their deliberations, but Veltar could see the human shuttle still docked to his ship, waiting, patient, ready to honor whatever decision they made. Young navigator Prendal, barely past his maturation ceremonies, stood with the passion of youth in his harmonic voice. "Have we forgotten what we just witnessed? The humans destroyed an entire Corsair fleet in minutes, with weapons that turned matter itself against their enemies. If they wanted to harm us, we would already be space dust." "That's precisely what frightens me," whispered Captain Yarveth of the Serene Passage. "Such power in the hands of any species is dangerous. What happens when their interests no longer align with ours?" The argument might have continued for hours more, but Solanin's voice cut through the debate from the communications station. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead investigation ship. They're demanding immediate response to their queries." Veltar nodded grimly. "Put it through to the main assembly." The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the angular features of a hegemony war marshal. The Scar were one of the most militaristic species in the Confederation, and War Marshal Kreestar's scarred exoskeleton spoke of countless battles. "Kithara vessels. This is War Marshal Kreestar commanding the investigation flotilla Iron Claw. Our sensors detected massive energy discharges in this system consistent with weapons of mass destruction. You will provide complete sensor logs and testimony regarding the incident immediately." Elder Korthalan stepped forward, her aged voice carrying the authority of generations. "War Marshal, we are refugees under Confederation protection statutes. We have committed no crimes and owe you no explanations." Kreestar's mandibles clicked in what Veltar recognized as Scar amusement. "Elder, the destruction of 27 warships is not a matter of refugee status. Our preliminary scans show debris patterns inconsistent with any known weapons technology. You will comply with our investigation or be detained for questioning." The threat hung in the air like toxic gas. The Scar were within their legal rights under Confederation law, and everyone in the assembly knew it. But before anyone could respond, a new voice joined the communication. "War Marshal Kreestar." Admiral Chen's crisp tones carried an authority that seemed to make the very air grow heavy. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen, Terran Federation Navy. The Cathara refugees are under my protection. I suggest you reconsider your approach." The change in Krizatar's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. His mandibles snapped shut, his head crest flattened against his skull in what Veltar knew was an instinctive fear response among the Scar. "Terran!" the War Marshal hissed, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "You should not be here. The Accords of Xanath specifically." "The Accords of Xanath," Admiral Chen interrupted coldly, "were signed after your Confederation attacked human diplomatic vessels without provocation. They established that humanity will not interfere in Confederation space provided we are not threatened or called upon for assistance. The Cathara called for help. We answered." Veltar felt a chill run through his crystal matrix. The humans had mentioned these accords before, but to hear them discussed so casually while Confederation warships approached made the reality of the situation stark. "The distress call was not directed to your people," Kreztar protested, though his aggressive posture had completely vanished. "It was a routing error. Does the method of transmission matter?" Dr. Wright's voice joined the conversation. "Sentients in distress asked for help. Are you suggesting we should have ignored their plea because of a technical malfunction?" War Marshal Kreztar was clearly out of his depth. The Scar were brave warriors, but even they recognized when they faced something beyond their ability to fight. I must consult with Confederation Command." "You do that," Admiral Chen replied pleasantly. "In the meantime, my fleet will continue to protect these refugees until they've decided their future course of action. I trust that won't be a problem." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the assembly in stunned silence. Through the viewports, they could see the investigation fleet maintaining position at the edge of the system, clearly unwilling to come closer. "By the ancient crystals," breathed Captain Zelmon. "The entire Confederation is afraid of them." Veltar realized that the debate was over. The evidence of human power and human compassion had been laid bare before his people. The choice, when it came down to it, was simple. "We stay with the humans," he said quietly, and his words carried across the assembly hall with crystalline clarity. "All of us, together." The vote was unanimous. Commander Santos returned to the assembly hall to find the Cathara representatives glowing with bioluminescent displays of joy and relief. The sight was beautiful, like living artwork celebrating life itself. "The decision is made," Veltar announced formally. "The Cathara convoy accepts the protection and sanctuary offered by the Terran Federation. We commit our people, our knowledge, and our loyalty to your cause." The human diplomat smiled, but Veltar was learning to read the more subtle expressions on human faces. There was sadness there, mixed with the joy. "Captain," she said gently, "you should understand what this means. Once we transport you to human space, there will be no returning to this part of the galaxy. The Confederation will declare you non-persons, erased from their records. As far as galactic civilization is concerned, the Cathara will have simply vanished." "Perhaps," Elder Corthalan said with a harmonic laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "That is for the best. We have spent too long clinging to the past. It's time to embrace a new future." The evacuation began immediately. Human transport vessels, massive ships with cavernous cargo holds designed to carry entire colonies, emerged from subspace with mechanical precision. The efficiency was staggering. In less than 6 hours, every Cathara, every piece of equipment, every cultural artifact and biological sample had been transferred to the human ships. Veltar stood on the bridge of the Terran vessel, New Horizons, watching through the main viewport as the empty hulks of their former colony ships drifted in space. Captain Maria Rodriguez, the ship's commander, stood beside him. "We'll make sure they're properly disposed of," she said softly. "No evidence that your people were ever here." And our culture? Veltar asked. Our way of life? Will be preserved and celebrated, Captain Rodriguez assured him. The human colonies include dozens of refugee species, each maintaining their own traditions while contributing to our common civilization. You'll find worlds where Cathara crystal gardens can grow, where your people can sing the old harmonies under alien suns. Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. All vessels, prepare for jump to slip space. Destination, the Kepler colonies. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Veltar watched the Confederation investigation ships maintaining their cautious distance. War Marshal Kreistar had received his orders from High Command, and they were exactly what anyone familiar with galactic politics would have expected. Observe, document, and under no circumstances engage the human fleet. What will you tell them? Veltar asked Commander Santos, who had joined them on the bridge for the departure. The truth, she replied simply, that the Bloodfang Corsairs attacked a refugee convoy, and that convoy was defended by parties unknown. By the time the investigation fleet arrived, the survivors had already departed for parts unknown. And they'll believe that? Lieutenant Commander Park, who was coordinating with his security teams across the fleet, looked up from his station. They'll pretend to believe it. The Confederation has built their entire political structure around the assumption that humanity doesn't exist in this part of the galaxy. Admitting otherwise would require them to acknowledge that they've been living under the protection of the very species they once tried to exterminate. Dr. Wright, who had been studying Cathara biological samples with obvious fascination, added his perspective. It's a comfortable fiction for both sides. We get to help people without dealing with bureaucratic interference, and they get to maintain their illusions of security and control. The slipspace engines engaged with a sensation that Veltar's people described as the universe singing. Reality folded around them, and the normal stars were replaced by the flowing lights of higher dimensional travel. How long until we reach your colonies? Veltar asked. 3 days, Captain Rodriguez replied. You'll have time to prepare your people for what they're going to see. The Kepler colonies are extensive. Over those 3 days, Veltar learned just how extensive. The Kepler system contained 7 terraformed worlds, each adapted for different refugee species that humanity had encountered and offered sanctuary. Orbital habitats housed billions of beings, while massive industrial complexes churned out everything from food to starships to research equipment. But what struck him most was the diversity. As the New Horizons approached the central hub station, Veltar could see dozens of different vessel designs in the traffic patterns. Ships from species he recognized and many he didn't, all bearing the distinctive markings of the Terran Federation. How many? He asked softly, as they watched a hegemony-style cruiser dock at a station clearly designed by Zenthari architects. Refugee species? 47 so far, Dr. Wright replied. Some fled wars, some escaped ecological disasters, some were exiled for political reasons. All found homes here. The docking procedures were handled with the same efficient precision that marked everything the humans did. But Veltar noticed something else. There was genuine warmth in how the various species interacted. This wasn't just a collection of exiles huddled together for mutual protection. This was a genuine community. As his people disembarked onto the station, Veltar saw Cathara children, some born in space, who had never known the feel of solid ground, running excitedly through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Their crystalline forms reflected the bioluminescence of Altarian traders, the thermal patterns of Vorthon engineers, and the simple wonder of discovery that transcended all species barriers. Commander Santos appeared at his side as he watched the cultural exchange begin. Your people will be assigned quarters in the Cathara sector of New Geneva. That's the 3rd planet in the system. The climate and atmospheric conditions have been adjusted to match your homeworld as closely as possible. Your scientists will work with our terraforming teams to establish proper crystal gardens and harmonic resonance chambers." "And in return?" Veltar asked, though he was beginning to understand that humans didn't think in terms of simple exchanges. "Your music," she said with a smile. "Your art, your scientific knowledge, your perspective on the universe. The same thing we ask of all our refugee partners. Be yourselves, contribute what you can, and help us build something better than what any of us could achieve alone." Admiral Chen's final message to the Cathara was broadcast throughout the fleet as they prepared to transition to normal space. "To our new friends and partners, welcome to the Terran Federation. You are no longer refugees. You are no longer homeless wanderers in the dark between stars. You are citizens of humanity's extended family, and that means you will never be alone again." As the New Horizons dropped out of slip space and New Geneva filled the viewports with its blue-green beauty, Veltar realized that their distress call hadn't gone astray at all. It had gone exactly where it was meant to go, to the one species in the galaxy that remembered what it meant to be lost among the stars, and who had dedicated themselves to ensuring that no one else would have to face that darkness alone. In the months that followed, the Cathara would learn that their rescue was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, other refugee convoys would find their distress calls answered by mysterious protectors. Pirates would discover that their victims sometimes had guardian angels with impossible weapons, and the Galactic Confederation would continue to pretend that the humans didn't exist, even as their protection quietly transformed this entire arm of the galaxy into something approaching paradise. The distress call had gone astray, but perhaps some things were meant to be lost so they could be found by exactly the right people at exactly the right time.